This is a wonderful panel. I have here with me, the ladies that will be driving both the edtech and blockchain sectors. I don't know if Asik Mani is still here, but let's proceed. So given the situation now, 2020 has been a year of pandemic and it's about to close. And I think this is something that people are looking forward to with a vaccine in place or hopefully arriving soon. People are now looking at 2021. And I think this is an opportunity for both the education, blockchain, the government sectors to recalibrate and move on for next steps. So I guess this one is really for Grace to begin with and maybe provide some insights. So Grace, with your perspective on the education sector, what is the outlook for online learning come 2021? And how did the education sector adapt to the pandemic?
Okay. Thanks, Joey, for that. First, thank you so much for inviting me and to represent the education space in this conversation. Just listening with everyone's presentation and key points on what's happening in the fintech sector makes me more hopeful that we could really transform total Philippines to embrace digital as the most efficient way of connecting people and being more efficient in terms of our output. Before I respond to that on what have we been doing in the education space? Definitely a lot. And I think it's not just the education space, but even fintech. We've been ready. We have the technology, we have actually the hardware and the software to really begin and accelerate the acceptance of digital technology and make it really a way of life. It's just that the pandemic obviously has forced everyone to further accelerate it. How I wish that the speed that the fintech has done in really transforming that digital technology is at the same speed that's happening in the education sector. What I really appreciate with all the sharing earlier is that there is already a critical mass in terms of like that acceptance of fintech in the way of life of Filipinos. But unfortunately, it's not yet at that same speed when it comes to the education sector. I know you've seen like, announcement of like tablets and mobile phones being given out to schools and to students, but it's still not enough. We are on the same boat that we are suffering from the not so good facilities that we have right now in the infrastructure. And yet the fintech was able to convince a critical mass to really have that payment system available mobile, and a lot of Filipinos being more comfortable having those transactions online. And yet when you look at the education space, we do have some, but it's still not at the critical mass. So if you would just allow me to share a few facts to better understand what's happening here, even if we see technology getting more incorporated in the education. First, there's more than 800 schools who have already shut down and announced closed operations this school year because of the pandemic. Even like the strong institutions that we value. I mean, I'm sure some of you knows some of those established schools who are even in the university belt have publicly declared that they cannot accept students anymore because they're having a hard time to really transitioning their school setup from traditional to having a distance learning. So that's one fact to take note. Second, I'm sure all of you have seen the news that like the big institutions, big tier 1 schools have announced that they will not conduct entrance exam because there's no facility for them to really convert that traditional physical exam done in this classroom to shift it to online. And thirdly, DepEd has announced that some of the public schools in Visayas and Mindanao, starting this year, will open up their schools so that students could come back physically in those classrooms. That's a reality that we're also managing right now. We do have the technology being embraced, but it's not yet on the critical mass. The reason why I'm sharing this is that the education sector would want to learn from fintech on how we could advance and get to that innovation point where at a critical mass There's already a good critical mass embracing technology. And I am here to ask if we could create that ecosystem. I've been hearing the word ecosystem from most of our speakers today, and I appreciate that. And my ask is, can we define that ecosystem not just within fintech, but really sharing that information, that learning, especially to the education space? We want to learn more on how you're able to advance the transformation in your sector and what are those strategies that we could fast adapt in the education space. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. I know also, even in the fintech space, but for us, how could we get to a critical mass just like how you've done it in fintech? So that's a quick sharing I have on the education space. And really, it's an ask for a collaboration, knowing that we are one ecosystem.
Well, Grace, you have a platform for that. I mean, there are a lot of industry leaders listening in, and I'm sure somebody, some company will take up that challenge. But before I go to Anne, I just like to have one more question, if you don't mind.
Mhm.
Given the, let's just put it this way, schools are now being are choosing between going traditional or probably getting distance learning first. Uh, you mentioned that some we're not yet at the critical tipping point. What would make that happen? I mean, do you think schools would just go back to face-to-face online classroom setting, or there's now a realization that online learning is the way to go? In the same way that financial services has made that shift and decided that online financial services, digital financial services, is the way to go.
Okay. Um, Digital transformation is obviously a process of change. And we all know that the first step on that process of change before the acceptance and really being part of that change happens, the very first step that happens on that change is resisting change. So the critical mass right now in the education space, obviously the critical mass are your decision makers and influencers in the education space, are still on the first stage. That's why instead of like, how do we transform? How do we move forward? What we are dealing with right now is still the resistance of most of the players in the education space. And this is not just limited actually to public schools or to the small schools. What is difficult is that the influencers in the education space are they themselves who are still resisting it. So that is where we want to ask for help. Like we know what needs to be done. We have like the materials, the curriculum, but like it's mindsets right now that we need to manage. And that's where we want to learn more. How did the fintech able to really drive that change from the first stage of the critical mass resisting it and then finally accepting it? We all thought it was the pandemic that will push more of our educators to really embrace the digital transformation, just exactly what happened to fintech. It was much easier to make the transactions online, the payments, right? Online. But it didn't exactly happen as much in the education space. So there, a lot of things to learn. I wouldn't want to say that I know the answers right now because we have the tools, but we're still seeing resistance actually in our set of audience, and that's what we want to pick up. So really right now I could share more facts, but more than that, it's how could we work together so we could fast adopt your learnings to the education space.
Thank you, Grace. Wow. Big challenges ahead for the edtech sector.
Yes.
Going to Anne. Anne, you've been advocating for blockchain since I've known you, and but then you've also seen there's opportunity and mission for the excluded sectors. How can we make that work for those sectors that have been excluded to adopt fintech using blockchain?
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. Nice to meet you again, Jove. It's been a while. I'm happy to be here in this forum. First, we've been doing and been very active with two products for this year, specifically during the lockdown and the pandemic. We have this first the GAVA platform. This is a crowdfunding platform for charities and individuals who wish to raise money online, and we are heavily powered by our direct partnerships and integration with DragonPay, PayMaya, GCash, and Coins. So the platform has raised tens of millions this year for personal causes like purchase of masks and PPEs, dedicated to front lines and also to supporting the bereaved families of the Ulysses rescuers. Another one is our revolutionary one-stop shop livelihood app. We call it DigiCoop. So during its launch from just this mid-year, we have onboarded 100 co-ops in just 10 days, and now we have over 300 plus co-ops using our platform. What we thought would be slow became very, very fast, despite the mobility restrictions and other barriers in onboarding customers. This has proven as that global challenges and crises like this pandemic can really drive initiatives to a new speed and height. And to your question that how can we drive this using blockchain and go forth the initiative of financial inclusion, let me just define you how our company define financial inclusion first. We define it as inclusive economic growth. It should mean placing the marginalized sector to a higher level of economic capability to thrive and become more resilient through any test of time, crisis, or even the pandemic. So with the ecosystem that we are serving, it's perceived to be very slow, conservative, and backward sector, and that's the cooperative sector. But right now, they are not just evolving, but surprisingly in a revolution technology, they are in a revolution, a technology revolution. And they are now realizing that the way to stay competent, current, and significant, digital transformation is the way to go. And so right now, all of these initiatives that we are seeing, together with the support of our government agencies, allow us to really power and to really go forth the sectors that were previously untapped or even underserved. And these realizations are not just coming from the fintech companies or fintech startups, but these are from the clients or the customer side themselves. So I think this would be a very, not just challenging for 2021, but very, very exciting for all of us. And we're so positive that, these different technologies, the latest technologies such as blockchain, will enable faster, more transparent, more robust type of processing all of this inter agencies and inter institutions type of payments.
Thank you. And just one more question before we close the panel. In your dealings with corporates, I mean, I'm glad. Congratulations, 300 cooperatives on the platform. What has been the performance so far of the cooperatives? You mentioned that they're in a revolution. How did that revolution happen?
Yeah, so I think this lockdown, these restrictions in the mobility and everything else put together gave them this realization that, this is the way to go. And we've been trying to delay this, being reluctant about going forth, stepping forward, embracing technology, embracing digital transformation. But right now, they're just into it right now, and they know it's you either digitize or die, right?
Yeah, but how big do you think is that? It's the cooperative sector, because a lot of people may not realize the extent, the size of the market.
Oh, I think based on the CDA report, you could say easily active cooperatives would be on the 7,000 to 8,000 active cooperatives.
Oh, that's a lot. That's a lot. So, ladies, we're about to close the panel. any 30-seconder you'd like to push to the audience? Starting with you, Anne, and then Grace.
Okay, because I'm in a hurry, what I'd like to go first. Again, I'd like to just highlight again for us, especially for other fintech startups out there. Being financial inclusion just doesn't just mean putting them into the cashless payment system. Doesn't just mean that you give them bank account. For us, financial inclusion should mean an elevation to the current economic status of these people, especially the marginalized ones. It should be that tool or product that you give out there should provide them an ability to build wealth, and it should mean placing them to a level of resilience more than anything else. Thank you.
Thank you. Grace?
For us, I will be asking the same. Let's collaborate. I personally would really want to learn more about fintech, on how great you are able to really advance the agenda of digital transformation, and we would really want to do the same in the education sector. The more skilled Filipinos we have, the more talents that we're able to distribute, not just in the education space, but also on fintech, so that we could really advance the economy.
Thank you, Grace. So I guess diversity is not just about marginalized groups, but also gender diversity.